Does anyone know the hotkey to call your mom to pick you up when you're scared? Hello everyone. How about we spend today looking at an old Soviet classic, shall we? This is the BTR. More specifically, this is the BTR-70. And more specifically, this is the BTR-70 in the game ARMA REFORGER. Today I am teaming up with the nice peoples over at Bohemia Interactive to showcase the iconic but often misunderstood Soviet armored car that people like to complain on Reddit about a lot. So 10 billionth azimuth check in 5 minutes, the like and subscribe button, and let's talk about it. First, let's see how most of your Reforger gameplay looks like when you use this thing. This is you, and this is your BTR-70. Isn't it cute? This is your objective. And these are the people whose only purpose on this earth is to make sure that objective isn't secured by you. It goes without saying that your performance was nothing short of suboptimal. Now later I'm going to show you what your gameplay could look like if you change your tactics a bit, but first let's look at the vehicle itself. The BTR-70 is a Russian-designed 8-wheeled armored personnel carrier, originally designed in the late 60s and put into service in 1972. Since then, it has seen dozens of conflicts, from the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the battlefields of Ukraine, and the 2021 Kyrgyzstan-Tajikistan war. I didn't even know those guys did that, good for them. What people tend to get wrong about this vehicle and many vehicles like it is what it's actually meant for. Despite having 8 giant wheels, a turret with heavy guns sticking out of it, and an overall heavily armored protected appearance, this thing is vulnerable to pretty much anything bigger than a rifle round. So don't get surprised when you get one-shotted by something that was originally designed to destroy an actual tank. In terms of armor protection, these things are essentially one step above just standing out in the open and hoping really hard that the enemy misses you. BTR-70 armor at its absolute thickest is only 9mm thick. That level of armor is only going to be found on the frontal hull and the turret. The sides and rear thickness shrinks down to just 7mm, while the roof and floor at just 6. That would, at most, protect you from standard intermediate rifle caliber fire, or medium machine gun fire, but at long distances after those rounds have lost most of their kinetic energy. While that's fine for protecting against things like some artillery shrapnel and bursts of small arms fire, anything bigger than an M16 shooting at you is gonna be a problem. And that's not even mentioning the tires, which by nature of being tires, are easily shredded by anything with both mass and/or velocity. While the BTR does have run-flat tires, if more than just a couple of them get popped, you are in essence just stuck there. Congratulations, you are now promoted from armored car to stationary machine gun nest. But what are these actually for? Why go through the effort of building an APC that can't really protect you when something like an existing BMP that's also built could? Well, BTR's had one simple goal: get the brave Soviet infantry troops to an objective and fast. Everything else, and I mean everything there, is and was optional. In the world of Cold War Soviet units, you'll find 2 major types of formations: tank divisions and motor rifle divisions. Tank divisions are exactly what they sound like: large units centered around tanks that typically serve the role of exploiting weak points in a NATO defensive line, driving as hard and as fast to the west as they can manage. These units did contain infantry, but these guys would have been riding around in BMPs, as the additional armor and firepower on them was necessary for that kind of exploitive fight. BTRs, on the other hand, were more common in the motor rifle division, which placed more emphasis on the infantry vehicles carried than the vehicles themselves. Motor rifle divisions were also the ones that attack first, and how that plan was supposed to work is evident in how the BTR is designed. Wheeled vehicles, like the BTR, perform better in more built-up areas with roads compared to a tracked vehicle. They're significantly faster, lighter, and quieter, making them ideal for first-wave assaults. Initial Soviet objectives, if the Cold War ever went hot, were centered around key pieces of infrastructure, meaning that there were going to be a lot of roads going in and out of them. BTR-70s were also designed to be amphibious, which, if you want to keep your design as compact as a BTR, you're going to have to keep it really light because this thing ain't big and it ain't going to be displacing a ton of water. Bridges over bodies of water are obvious military choke points, so much so that they make entire movies just about that. That's great and all, you might be thinking, but it doesn't explain why I keep getting blown up at them after forgetting my hotkey layout for the 1000th time. You're noticing a trend. I keep making hotkey jokes because it's personal. BTR-70s were built with bigger levels of support in mind and operated with a strict combined arms warfare way of thinking. Tank division combat was very much centered on the tanks and BMPs doing the fighting primarily, so they needed the extra armor and firepower to make up for that. Motor rifle divisions with BTRs had the fighting more spread out and against more deliberate objectives. The more vulnerable your vehicle is, the more planning required for it to do what it's actually supposed to do. It's what the Soviets did, and it's what you should too if you don't want your entire team of autistic tryhards to get super angry at you in the Discord chat. Before a BTR-70 would even reach an objective, recon assets would be pushed forward, identifying ambush points, NATO defensive positions, and softening up the objective with artillery and air support. In a perfect world, long-range fires saturate a target, and as soon as rounds are complete, you and your fancy schmancy BTR-70 are rolling up on the objective all nice and pretty. With that said, here is where the ideal Soviet doctrine, the reality of war, and your chances of getting a sick clip start to differ a good bit. Russian doctrine relied on speed and aggression over everything else, and part of that is a polar opposite approach to how close you actually drive your armored vehicles to bad guys. Western doctrine, both then and now, is very deliberate on where and when infantry dismount, and what the vehicle does after that happens. If you're an American force with IFVs or APCs approaching an objective, you kick your dismounts out very early at pre-designated VDOs, or vehicle drop-off points. From there, your vehicles place themselves in a well-protected location where they are able to provide heavy direct fire support from a distance. Meanwhile, the infantry close the distance and actually perform the attack. The goal there is to leverage the better optics and heavier guns found on these kinds of vehicles compared to the guy with a LA or RPG that would be able to take them out. Soviet doctrine at the time, however, lacked this portion, and the idea was to drive up as fast and as close as possible to the objective, if not literally physically onto it, and then kick out the infantry, but only if they had to and couldn't fight from the vehicle itself. This, naturally, leaves a lot more burnt-out BTR holes sitting around. And that's fine if you are an invading army with a couple hundred others right behind the one that just got exploded, but maybe not if you only have one or two during a match. That tactic of vehicle bum rushing also has proven historically to not be a good idea in real life or in ARMA. So even if you're one of the guys that likes blasting the Soviet Union anthem over proximity chat, maybe take a note out of the Western capitalist pig playbook. Anyone who has played ARMA knows that the hatches to get into and out of the BTR are nightmarish and don't look like they were actually intended for real human beings. Mounting and dismounting from armored vehicles is typically when everyone is at their most vulnerable, so it pays to plan ahead. While that holds true in Reforger, it holds even more true in real life. If you were to pop one of these bad boys open while it's fully loaded, you'd find a total of 10 personnel, 3 crew, and 7 infantry passengers in the back. You'd also probably be shocked to find that many people in a vehicle of this size, as BTRs, especially older ones like the 70 model, are infamous for how cramped and uncomfortable they are, reaching levels that verge on inhumane. The only actual way you could fit more people into one of these things is if you put them all in a giant blender and then you poured them in liquid form, but knowing the Soviets at the time, this was probably at least considered briefly. But the BTR-70 is so much more than just an armored car. Well, not really, it's not, but it does have 2 guns on top, and that's pretty cool. Both in ARMA and real life, BTR-70s come equipped with a manned turret armed with a 14.5mm KPVT heavy machine gun and a coaxially mounted 7.62 PKT. While they might visually look sorta similar to turrets found on other armored vehicles, they're closer in function to the ones you'd find on a Humvee or other kind of truck. These are manually operated using hand cranks, as opposed to using hydraulics and electrics like an LAV-25 would. This doesn't have a significant impact on gameplay, but it does make real-life operation a huge pain in the ass. And it also means that the gun is not stabilized. In a super condensed sense, stabilized guns can be accurately fired while a vehicle is on the move. Conversely, unstabilized ones, like the BTR-70 has, cannot, at least if it's moving at any meaningful speed or trying to shoot something that's not at point-blank range. The gun it fires, the 14.5mm, is a bit of an oddity, at least in more modern context, and it was already a bit of a relic during the 80s when Reforger is set. The KPVT is the vehicle-mounted version of the KPV, which started life as a heavy infantry gun in the 40s before transitioning to anti-aircraft roles later on. Being larger than 50 cal but smaller than the rounds fired out of IFV cannons like the 25mm on the LAV-25, it sits in a slightly awkward caliber middle ground. But that doesn't mean it's not effective. I certainly wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of one. Two types of ammo are typically loaded into these. Armored piercing for things like that pesky lav that's about to blast you into another dimension, and incendiary, meant for softer targets like Humvees, Jeeps. That said, this gun can pretty much kill anything short of an actual tank. It's going to take you more rounds to do that than, say, a 25mm on an IFV, but you'll get there, and you'll probably have fun while you do it. While naturally, 600 rounds per minute of 14.5mm rounds hitting a person's squishy meat parts at 3,300 feet per second will require them to be transported home in plastic baggies, that job is better performed by the coaxial PKT machine gun. This is where we have to get into the boring things like target overkill. Now, I know how fun it is blasting dudes in the face with an RPG, but it's generally better to save that ammo for things that need it. The BTR-70 is no different. For soft targets like troops, unarmored trucks, using the smaller coaxial gun is better suited, as it allows you to save the heavier ammo for the targets that actually need it. Vehicle ammo in real life is even more specific in that sense. You can always find a corner to cram an extra belt of coax ammo, but not always for the bigger stuff, it just takes up too much room. We typically classify things into primary, secondary, and auxiliary weapon systems on military vehicles, but the reality is that each weapon system is designed for different kinds of targets. A BTR-70's coax isn't a backup gun, it's just as important as the bigger one. If you're not carrying around troops in the hull and are just shooting at stuff, it's best to think of the BTR-70 as a big machine gun that happens to have wheels, rather than a dedicated fighting vehicle thing. Find a nice firing point, make some stationary shots, and move on. You will be much happier this way, I promise. Or at least happier than the guy complaining online that his BTR keeps getting blown up with grenades. Now finally, let's see what happens if you take everything I just talked about and put it into practice. You, BTR-70, objective, bad guys. But this time, you're gonna use your brain.
Огонь на подавление!
Would you look at that? Not a scratch. Well, at least not physically. The events of today will inevitably haunt you for the rest of your life. But you took the town, which means you get to do all this all over again tomorrow. If despite everything we just talked about, you still think the BTR-70 sucks, that is completely fair because it absolutely does. When this thing came out, it was almost immediately replaced with the BTR-80 series because the Soviets saw how much it actually sucked. One major Russian study determined that, quote, the BTR-70 has shown its complete unsuitability for use in combat operations. Which can't feel good, because I'm sure it's trying its absolute best. The same cannot be said about your teammates that keep spending resources on them and just getting obliterated in 5 seconds. But before I go, I want to give a huge shout out to the people over at Bohemia Interactive. I love ARMA. The guys over there are awesome. I've played ARMA since I was a kid, and I still play it with my friends. They didn't tell me to add this part at the end. I just wanted to because the game is fun. So if you haven't played it before, I highly suggest it. And if any enterprising individual wants to set up, I don't know, a Discord server for everyone here, I would not be mad, so we could all kind of get together and play, because I need more people to do that with. But on that note, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please subscribe, make sure to check out ARMA REFORGER, and I will see you in the next one.